I cast my line out and waited about 30 seconds and then yelled, "I got a big one here." Rebecca was excited, clapping her hands and bouncing up and down in her seat. Just as I got my catch close to the boat, I pretended to lose the fish. Rebecca slumped and said something like, "Oh no, I guess it got away and I'm left with nothing," I said, frowning and pretending to be upset. "No, wait, there's still something on the line." I pulled the last of the line in and asked, "What's this?" Tied on the end of the line was the engagement ring I had put there earlier. I untied it and turned to Rebecca holding it out. If you looked up surprised in the dictionary, there would have been a picture of Rebecca there. Her eyes got big, her mouth opened, and her hands went to her face. "Becky, I love you. I want us to be more than roommates. Will you marry me?" I don't advise surprising someone when you're in a canoe in the middle of a lake. Rebecca let me put the ring on her finger, looked at it lovingly, and jumped into my lap. We ended up swimming in the cold water because the canoe capsized. It didn't matter. We held on to each other, kissing, with Rebecca saying yes several times and treading water, but it was good that we both had life vests on. 1 month before the wedding, I was asked to come to Mr. Coleman's office. I knew the reason was the prenup. I didn't have a problem signing it. I had never thought of Rebecca in terms of her money or her dad's. She was all I wanted. I understood the precaution that Mr. Coleman was taking, but it still pissed me off a little. I felt that I had shown time and again that I wasn't a fortune hunter. The lovely Sylvia told me to go right in, and Mr. Coleman stood and came to greet me when I entered his office. He wasn't alone. There was another man with him. It was his attorney, I thought. Mr. Coleman introduced us and I was right. It was Carl Sanders, the attorney for J.C. Well. "Jamie, it's good to see you. Wedding plans coming along okay?" He was trying to put me at ease before getting down to business. "Hello, Mr. Coleman. Yeah, the plans are all set. I'm looking forward to getting on with our lives after all this hoopla," I answered. "Don't you think you could call me Jason?" he said with a smile. "Okay, Jason then. Can we get on with this? I'm in the middle of installing a new program." I was going to sign the prenup, but I'll be damned if I would jump through any hoops for him. Maybe I was playing with fire here, but all the phony friendliness was getting on my nerves. Sanders laid out the agreement and began to explain all the clauses and stipulations. Basically, if Rebecca and I got divorced for any reason, I would get whatever I came into the marriage with. Anything obtained or owned by Rebecca and I jointly would be split 50-50ths. I would receive $150,000 for each year or partial year that we were married, and if I was unfaithful during the marriage and it led to divorce, I would get nothing. I read the agreement and looked at Sanders. He asked if I understood and if I wanted my own attorney to look it over before I signed. I picked up a pen from the set on Mr. Coleman's desk and made a few notations and changes to the agreement. Sanders read over my shoulder as I was writing, and I could see his eyes open wide with surprise. I finished my changes, handed the papers to Mr. Coleman and said, "Make these changes, type it up and send it down to the dungeon with a notary and I'll sign it." I turned and left the office before Mr. Coleman or Sanders could stop me. A brave or maybe foolhardy action on my part, some people would say, but I wasn't the same young man trying to build a career that I had been when I started at J.C. Well. I liked the job and wanted to continue doing it, but I could make it on my own. The royalties from my first program and the percentage of sales from the modified program and my consultant fees gave me enough money to live well if I was frugal. Rebecca could tell something had upset me when I came home. I told her a project wasn't going well and apologized for my mood. She decided what I needed was a big dose of Becky affection. Dinner was cold again before we got to it. The next afternoon, Sanders and Sylvia, of all people, came into my office with the amended agreement. I had deleted the clause concerning the money I would receive for each year of the marriage. Other changes stated that if we divorced, both of us would leave with what we had brought into the marriage. Any assets gained during the marriage would be split 50-50ths unless adultery was the reason for divorce. In that case, the guilty party would get nothing. And I added that if infidelity by either of us was the reason for divorce, then that would be listed as the grounds for divorce, not some generic irreconcilable differences. After reading it, I signed and handed it back to Sanders and told him, "Now have Rebecca sign it. Give me a copy and it's all legal. Now please leave. I have work to do." Sanders handed the document to Sylvia, who notarized my signature, and he took the document and left. Sylvia was grinning, and finally started to chuckle. I looked at her, not understanding what was so funny. I just had to see Sanders' face when he handed you the amended agreement. It was priceless. I don't think anyone has ever dictated changes to anything he has ever written. That was almost as funny as what happened this morning, she told me and waited for my question. Okay, I'll play straight man. What happened this morning? I don't know how, but Rebecca heard about Jason ambushing you with the prenup, and she came into his office this morning breathing fire. She swept right past my desk and cornered Jason behind his desk. My brother is a drill sergeant, and I don't think he could have chewed arse any better. I mean, she was ferocious. I thought I was going to pee my pants. I was laughing so hard. Well, I'm glad we could amuse you, Sylvia, I said, a little annoyed. Pull in your horns, sonny boy. I'm on your side. I heard that bullshit about the board of directors that Jason fed you. I think he should have been straight with you from the start. Okay. I nodded, calmed down, and thanked her for her thoughts. Sylvia patted me on the shoulder and went back to her throne. That evening when I got home, Rebecca was still fired up and started the minute I walked in the door. Why didn't you tell me, and how could you stand to do that, and I know you're not after my money, and so on. Then she said that Daddy wouldn't be invited to the wedding, and it would be a cold day in hell before she forgave him for insulting me. I listened to her for a couple of minutes and walked over, put my arms around her, and kissed her. I sat down and pulled her onto my lap and held her. She tried to get up and then started giggling and finally relaxed. You have to invite your father. It would hurt him badly if you excluded him, and you would regret it later. Just sign the damn prenup and let's get on with our lives, I told her. We spent most of the evening releasing the stress in a very romantic and physical way. We had planned a small wedding, having to stand up to her dad to keep it from getting out of control. I did finally convince her to forgive her father. The ceremony was at my hotel in the small ballroom with about 50 people in attendance, with a reception immediately following. Around 1 a.m., Rebecca and I snuck away and went to our apartment upstairs. We would plan and take a honeymoon in a couple of months. Rebecca had forgiven her dad, and he showed up at the wedding by himself. He left Cindy, or whoever the flavor of the month was, at home. I guess Jason didn't want to cause any hoopla by bringing a date that was as young as his daughter. For a wedding present, he gave us a large block of stock in JCOL Enterprises, a gift whose monetary value was about 2 years' combined salary. Months later, our honeymoon consisted of 2 weeks doing the things we both enjoyed. We stayed in Monterey for a week playing golf at some of the most scenic courses in the U.S., Pebble Beach, Spyglass, and Pacific Grove. The second week, we roughed it. We camped at the Grand Canyon. We hiked down the Bright Angel Trail to Phantom Ranch at the bottom of the canyon. The hike down was through a rocky, dry, and desert-like land, but when we got to the ranch, it was like an oasis. We crossed 2 or 3 streams getting to the ranch, and there were trees, plants, and wild flowers everywhere. The accommodations for overnight visitors at Phantom Ranch are like a big bunkhouse. You share a large sleeping room and a bathroom with any other guests. It wasn't very romantic for 2 newlyweds on their honeymoon, but we enjoyed the experience. The next morning, we hiked back out and spent the night in Flagstaff before returning home. When I started at Chcal, I had sold my old truck because they furnished me with a company car. 1 month after our honeymoon, I bought my own vehicle. It was the first I had owned for several years. Rebecca fell in love with the Harley CVO Softail convertible I chose. Since we couldn't get away for more than a 3-day weekend, most of the time we rode the Harley for our adventures. On our rides, I would sometimes let Rebecca drive the Harley. I would sit behind her and help her with the gears and clutch until she was comfortable, and then sit back and let her have it. We did that mostly on back roads with no traffic while she was learning, and because she wasn't motorcycle qualified. For some reason, the police took a dim view of untrained people driving motorcycles. One Thursday evening, Rebecca told me that she had a function to attend on Saturday and would be gone all day. I offered to go with her, but she said it would be too boring for me and suggested that I play golf that day. She left at 7 a.m., and when she wasn't home by 4, I began to worry, but just as I started pacing, she came dancing in the door. Her hair was mussed, she looked flush, and had a twinkle in her eyes. I hate to admit it, but I thought about how she looked after our night in college. Rebecca bounced over to me, threw her arms around me, and beamed at me. "Would you like to kiss you newly motorcycle qualified wife?" Huh. A brilliant response if I do say so myself. She waved her license at me and then pointed to the designation to show that she was a qualified rider. That's where she had been all day, taking a riding class which gave her the qualification. Rebecca was dancing around like a kid that brought home a report card with all A's. I was happy for her and ashamed of myself for what I had been thinking. 2 weeks later on a Friday evening, I called her from in front of our hotel and asked her to come down and help me with something. She said she would be right down. I guess she never thought why I wouldn't have asked Jacob or the doorman to help me. Rebecca came out the front door and stopped in her tracks. I was sitting on a new Harley Sportster 1200 smiling at her. "You know we were on our honeymoon at the bottom of the Grand Canyon on your birthday, and I forgot a present for you. I hope this bike will make up for my being late." She bounced up and down for a few seconds and then ran over and jumped on me, almost knocking me off the bike. That's one of the things I love about her. If she gets excited about something, she reacts like a 16-year-old. After we recovered from the near fall off the bike, she jumped up behind me and told me to take her for a ride. "Not me, Becky. It's your bike. You drive it," I said and switched places with her. Room service had to send another dinner up to our apartment that evening. We didn't get back from her little ride until almost 11 p.m. I think she liked her present. In fact, she showed me how much that night after dinner. Rebecca was bright-eyed and full of energy the next morning. I was dragging a little. Never mind, I thought. It was all worth it. I had to talk her out of riding her birthday gift to work. It's hard to ride in a skirt and high heels without causing a scene. 6 months after the wedding, I came home and Rebecca wearing my favorite outfit, a ribbon around her neck and a smile. An hour later, after a proper response to the way she was dressed, she asked me when I thought we should start a family. We had talked about children before and after our wedding. We both agreed that a family would be great. I told her any time was good for me, and she responded that she would stop her birth control pills at the end of the month. "In the meantime, I think we should practice making a baby, don't you?" she asked as she pulled me on top of her again. Who was I to argue with my wife? And practice we did. For 6 months we practiced. We didn't expect anything to happen that first month. Her body had to readjust itself after she went off the pill. But for the next 5 months we went at each other like teenagers. About the 3rd month we started doing research on the internet about conceiving a baby. Rebecca made a chart and watched her temperature and all the other things women do when they want to get pregnant. We never hit the home run we were looking for. Rebecca got more impatient with every passing month. Finally, I suggested that we both see our doctors and have ourselves checked out. Who knows, maybe it's a vitamin deficiency, I told her. We both went to our respective doctors the same day and waited for the results of our tests. A few days later, my doctor called me and told me that I was fine. My little swimmers were strong and plentiful and could have done an Ironman competition. I didn't call Rebecca. I would tell her the results that evening at home. Rebecca wasn't home when I got there. It was a little unusual, but not unheard of. When she wasn't home by 7 p.m., I started pacing, and by 8, I started making phone calls trying to locate her. After the 3rd call, the phone rang before I could dial the next number on my list. It was Hope General Hospital telling me that Rebecca had been in an accident. I don't believe there is a speed law that I didn't break on the way to the hospital. Rushing into the ER, I found that Rebecca had already been admitted and was in a private room on the 3rd floor. I checked with the nurse's station and was led to her room. I turned to the nurse in alarm, but she said that Rebecca was sleeping, not unconscious. I saw the scraps and abrasions on her face and on her arm and hand that wasn't covered by the cast she was wearing. My God, what could have caused all this? I asked myself. Shortly, the nurse came back and told me the doctor was at the nurse's station if I wanted to talk to him. I introduced myself and asked him about Rebecca's injuries and her prognosis. We've set her broken arm and it will heal fine. She has a badly bruised hip and it'll be sore for a couple of weeks, but otherwise she's in pretty good shape. He looked at her chart and gave the nurse some instructions. If it wasn't for the mild concussion, she could go home, but we want to keep her for observation overnight. That's our major concern. The rest of her injuries are really superficial, although the road rash is hard to look at, Dr. Robbins explained. He patted me on the shoulder and continued. The abrasions on the side of her face and on her back look worse than they are. I don't believe they will leave a scar. In a few weeks, you'll have your wife back in all her glory. How did her face and back get so scraped up? I would think her seatbelt and airbags would have protected her better. Did she get thrown out of the car? Mr. O'Connor, your wife, was riding a motorcycle when she had the accident. It's a good thing she was wearing a helmet and leathers, or the outcome would have been far more serious. I thanked the doctor and went back to Rebecca's room and sat next to her bed. Why the hell was she riding her motorcycle at night? And from what I'd been told, she was doing almost 80 when she wrecked. I was still a little stunned that Rebecca had been on her bike. Then I wondered what could have caused her to go nuts like this. It didn't make any sense to me. Between the worry this evening about where she was, the speed run to the hospital, and the relief that she was okay, I guess the stress got to me. I fell asleep sitting next to the bed holding her hand. It must have been about an hour later that the nurse came in and gently woke me up. She said, "You have a call from a Mr. Coleman." He said he was Mrs. O'Connor's father. I went to the nurse's station and told Jason that Rebecca was going to be fine and explained her injuries. After promising that I would have her call him the next day, I hung up. I went back to Rebecca's room. As I sat down, she woke up. She looked around, confused and trying to decide where she was, then saw me. I've never seen such a look of abject sorrow as I saw on her face, and then she started crying. I sat on the bed and put my arms around her. It was several minutes before I could get her calmed down. "Care to tell me what made you do an Evel Knievel?" I asked. Now that I knew she was all right, I was really upset with her. I didn't expect the response I got. "Jamie, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Please forgive me." All of this while she was sobbing. I had a difficult time understanding what she was saying. "Take it easy, Becky. It's not a big deal. We'll get you a new bike. Of course you won't be riding for a while, or driving either from what the doctor said. Hell, we're usually together anyway, so transportation shouldn't be a problem," I said, trying to calm her down. She didn't answer and went back to sleep as I held her. I was able to take Rebecca home the next day and spent the rest of the weekend pampering her. She was uncomfortable and seemed very sad. I couldn't coax a smile out of her no matter what I did. I went back to work on Monday, but asked Jacob to have someone check in on Rebecca several times during the day. Slowly, Rebecca became more like her old self, but there was something lurking just under the surface. We would be talking in a group or watching TV, and Rebecca would unexplainably submerge into herself. Sometimes she would come back, but sometimes she was gone somewhere in her mind for several minutes. I was really beginning to worry about her. She was depressed and I couldn't find out why. 3 months after her accident, she became more alive and seemed to be okay. We started to make love again, but talking about a family seemed to upset her, so I didn't mention it again. She was almost frantic when we made love, and she tried too hard to have a good time. We went to some function or just out by ourselves. She laughed too quickly, too loudly, and she began to drink more. A lot more. Several times I almost had to carry her from the car to the elevator. By the second month, I'd had enough. I was losing sleep worrying about Rebecca's actions. One evening when we had a dance club with some friends, Rebecca really let loose. She was knocking back bourbon shots like they were lemonade. When she danced, she started to get really wild. I normally didn't mind if she danced with some of our friends, but this was too much. The final straw was when some guy from across the club asked her to dance. I wasn't the jealous type, but this guy was a few years younger than our group and a stranger. I didn't like the looks of him. His hair was too perfect, his shirt was open almost to his waist, showing off his chest, and he had several gold chains around his neck. I thought the Disco Dan look was long dead. I came back from getting another round of drinks for our friends at the table and saw Rebecca dry humping this guy on the dance floor. It took me almost 5 seconds to get to where they were dancing. Actually, it was more like screwing with their clothes on. I stepped in between them and turned to the guy. "Mind if I dance with my wife? Come on, honey, let's get it on." I took Rebecca by her arm and tried to lead her away from this jerk. I hoped he would understand the word wife, see that I was upset, and not get involved. It was getting a little late in life to start a fight in a bar. "Well, I think the lady wants to dance with me. I mean, she can be with you anytime. Let her have a little fun, pal," he replied with a smirk. He just had to call me pal, didn't he? I didn't like it any more now than I did back in college. "Hey, buddy, she's had a hard time lately, and she had a little too much to drink tonight. So please just walk away so I can take her home. I'll bring her home when we're done partying, pal. You just run along if you have to go home," he told me, again with that smirk. "You guys decide who gets me for the night and do it in a hurry. We're wasting party time," Rebecca said in a drunken slur. That was when the guy made a very bad decision. He tried to pull Rebecca away from me. I didn't realize that I had hit him until I saw him on the floor. He started to get up and I went crazy for a little while. I guess I was releasing all the stress of the last 4 months. By the time the red haze cleared from my eyes, Disco Dan and 2 others were lying on the floor holding their heads or crotches. I probably would have still been beating on them, but Thomas the bouncer wrapped his arms around me and led me back to my table. Not many people could have controlled me right then, but at 6 feet 5 inches and 300 pounds, Thomas was one that could stop me. I'm actually glad he did stop me. I really didn't want to spend the rest of my life on death row, and I had no doubt that I might have killed one of those men that night. I don't know if it was the way that Rebecca was dancing or how I'd worried about her since the bike accident, or that her actions reminded me of her wild child days that caused me to go nuts. I asked Thomas if I should wait for the police, but he just shook his head and told me to go home. Rebecca was standing at our table with her eyes wide open and her hands held over her mouth. She had never seen me go berserk. It must have sobered her up a little. Even that night years ago in college, I had been in control when I took on the 3 that were assaulting her. Once again, I had to help Rebecca up to our apartment. I had planned to get on her case for the way she'd been acting, but decided it wouldn't help. She was too drunk to understand. I got her to bed with a plastic trash can on the floor because I knew she would get sick later. I went into our bathroom to clean up and saw that at least one of the 3 guys had gotten in a couple of good punches. My top lip was split open and my right eye was swelling. In a few days, I was going to look like a raccoon. An ice pack and 2 fingers of Gentleman Jack made me feel better. But I knew that tomorrow morning, Rebecca and I had to straighten some things out. I called work and left a voicemail for my boss, telling him that I was taking a day off. Should I take something to settle my stomach and try and get some sleep, or should I drink myself into oblivion and forget about my troubles, at least until tomorrow? Sleep was my choice. I had been there, done that, and puked on the t-shirt by doing the drinking to oblivion thing. I slept in the guest bedroom. Hearing, seeing, and smelling Rebecca Upchuck all night wasn't my idea of a good time. Let her suffer by herself, I thought. Relatively early the next morning, I showered and fixed a breakfast for one. Rebecca was still sleeping it off. It was 10 a.m. when I heard her stumble into the bathroom, and I went to check on her. Rebecca had crawled back to bed and pulled the covers over her head. About an hour later, I heard her moaning and knew wake-up time was near. I put a small carafe of coffee on the nightstand along with water, aspirin, and a large mimosa. A mimosa is champagne and orange juice. Sometimes a little hair of the dog helped a person recover faster. It was noon when Rebecca came into the living room walking gingerly as if her head was going to fall off. She looked at me and started to say something, but I held up my hand for quiet and pointed to the sofa. I set another mimosa on the end table next to her and watched her drink about a third of it before I spoke. Would you care to tell me what last night was all about? Holding her head, she said, I'm sorry, Jamie. I let things get out of control last night. Please, I'm sorry, Rebecca answered. What was that bullshit way you were dancing with that a-hole, and then telling us to decide who got you for the night? I was angry, and it showed in my voice. I am sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I was so drunk I didn't know what I was saying. You know, I might have seriously injured that guy and his 2 buddies if Thomas hadn't stopped me. All because you were too drunk to know what you were doing. I wasn't letting up on her. I know. I've never seen you like that. She paused and then said, I really am sorry, Jamie. Please forgive me. Enough, I thought. She knows how upset I am. No need to beat her into the ground. I nodded and Rebecca came and sat in my lap. She put her arms around my neck and laid her head on my shoulder. We just held each other as she cried on my shoulder for a couple of minutes. Again, Rebecca rebounded and seemed more like her old self, but still there was something just off-center. Sometimes at night she would sit for 15 minutes or more staring at nothing. If I spoke to her, she would flinch or jump as if unaware that I had been there. I tried to be upbeat around her, hoping I could bring her out of whatever place she was in. Nothing I did had any lasting effect. When I asked her if anything was wrong or if something was bothering her, she would smile sadly, kiss my cheek and say everything was fine, that she was just tired or stressed about her work. There was something eating at her, but I couldn't find out what it was. We lived in this sort of limbo for 3 months. Our sex life suffered during this period. Rebecca never refused to make love with me, but she never initiated it. She was responsive during our loving, but the fire and intensity wasn't there. Thinking back over the last few months, I realized that everything went to hell starting with her motorcycle accident. I wondered if the accident was what was behind her behavior, but after thinking about it, I knew that whatever caused her to go nuts on the bike was the cause of her depression and sadness. One morning at work, Sylvia called and told me that Jason would like to see me in his office when I had the time. When the boss calls, you make time, so I told her I was on my way up. As I came into her inner sanctum, Sylvia handed me a cup of coffee and told me to go right in. Jason was on the phone and motioned me to a seating area off to the side of his desk. He finished his call and joined me. Jason asked about my department, what I thought about the 2 new hires in IT, and generally made small talk. Finally, I realized he was stalling before getting to why he had called me to his office. Okay, Jason, what's going on? Why did you want to see me? Stop stalling and get to it. I have work to do, I said. Being his son-in-law gave me a little leeway in our boss and employee relationship. Are you and Rebecca having problems? I know it's really none of my business, but something's wrong. She walks around in a daze most of the time, and her work is suffering. If she wasn't my daughter, they would have let her go by now. Please, if there is a problem, let me help, he said. At first I bristled at his interference, but then relaxed. He was a father worried about his daughter, and I was worried too. No, we're good. I've watched and worried about her actions for the last few months. It started right after the accident, but I can't get her to talk about what's bothering her. And there is something bothering her. I replied, what about the night in the bar when you did your Bruce Lee impression on those 3 guys? What caused that? How'd you know about that, Jason? And to answer your question, I have no idea. We talked about the next day and smoothed things out, but I still have no idea what caused her to behave that way, I said. A friend of mine and his wife were there and told me what happened. He said you went ballistic when the guy tried to pull Rebecca away from you, Jason said with a smile. We discussed Rebecca and the way she seemed to be just going through the motions, but neither of us could figure out her problem. Do you think we should get her into some type of therapy? I'll pay for it, but I think she needs more help than we can give her, Jason suggested. First of all, the only we here is Rebecca and me. Second, I can pay for any treatment for my wife that's necessary. And last, it's worth a try. I've been thinking the same thing, I told him. That evening at home, after dinner, Rebecca and I were sitting on the sofa together. By together, I mean we were sitting on the same piece of furniture. We weren't snuggling or holding hands or even touching. We didn't do that much anymore, and then only when I initiated it. Becky, what's bothering you? No, don't say everything is fine because it isn't. You walk around as if you're not really here. Out sex life is suffering, and you always seem to be sad. So what's bothering you? Nothing's bothering me. I've told you before, I'm just stressed about work. My energy level is down, so I guess I need to take vitamins or something. But I'm okay, she answered. Bullshit, I said softly. It's more than a vitamin deficiency, and it's more than a low energy level. Something's on your mind. If you won't talk to me about it, how about seeing a therapist for help? Maybe talking to a neutral party would help, I suggested. For the first time in several months, Rebecca reacted with some fire. Damn it, I told you nothing is wrong. I'm not going to talk to some egghead and have him tell me I'm nuts and need medication or treatment. If you can't stand to be around me, then leave. Now for the last time. I'm fine. She was very angry and almost screaming as she stomped off to our bedroom. Well, hell, I thought, that certainly went well. I was even more concerned and confused at her reaction. How can I help her if she won't admit something's wrong and refuses to talk about it? An hour later, I was still on the sofa pretending to go over a report. Actually, I was staring at the wall, trying to come up with some way to get my beautiful wife back. The woman in the bedroom wasn't the same Rebecca that I fell in love with. Rebecca came to the sofa, pushed the report I was holding to the side, and sat in my lap. I'm sorry for blowing up like that, Jamie. I know you're just trying to help, but please just let me alone. I'm okay. Really, I am. I'm just tired of everyone asking me what's wrong. Okay. I looked into her eyes for several seconds, and then I nodded at her. She got off my lap, took my hand, and led me to the bedroom. We made love that night, but it wasn't the same. Rebecca was tender, but the old enthusiasm wasn't there. She was holding back or something. Weeks went by and Rebecca seemed to rebound. She was more attentive and seemed to be happy, but it was artificial. It was like she was forcing herself to be happy to please me. Or maybe she was trying to get me off her back about what was bothering her. It was strange behavior, and I was still worried. On a Friday, Rebecca called me at work and said a charity group she was involved in asked her to come to a meeting that evening. She said she should be home by 10 and would see me at home. I didn't think too much about it. She worked with 3 or 4 charities, and there was some kind of meeting a couple of times a month. At 10:30 and with no Rebecca, I did start to think about it. Most of the charity meetings were during the day, not at night. At 11 p.m., I was pacing back and forth in our apartment, wondering where she could be. By 11:30, I was in full freak-out mode. I started making phone calls, but other than the charity's office and her office, there wasn't too many places to call. I did call the security guard at her building, but he started his shift at 7 and hadn't seen her. He did go check her office at my request and called back to tell me no one was there. Calm. I told myself, you need to stay calm. At midnight, I couldn't sit around anymore. I went to look for her. No idea where to look. She hadn't told me where the meeting was taking place, but I had to look anyway. I left a couple of notes that she couldn't miss, explaining that I was out looking for her and to call my cell. Our hotel had security 24/7, and I explained to guard where I was going and asked him to call me if Rebecca showed up. The first place I looked was her office building. I know the security guard told me she wasn't there. I went to check the parking garage to see if her car was there. Driving up and down the rows of parked cars on 4 levels had no results. Her car wasn't there. Next, it was the offices of the charity that was supposed to be having the meeting, and I searched for her car. It wasn't there either. It was 1:30, and I had one more idea. I checked the valet parking of the 3 hotels near the charity's office, thinking that a meeting might have been held in a conference room in one of them. It cost me $150 and got no results. I was out of ideas and couldn't think of any other place to look for her. I knew the police wouldn't do anything until she was missing for 24 hours, but I had an in. Several months ago, I had played in a charity golf tournament with a Ralph Jennings. He was the captain of the precinct that served the area around my apartment. During a couple of beers after our round, he mentioned that the precinct was having problems with some new software they had loaded onto the computers. Listening to him, I had an idea to solve the problem. On Monday, I took a long lunch and met him in his office. Examining the computers, I found that the problem was what I thought, and it took about 40 minutes to fix. Apparently, I made a friend for life. Ralph told me to call him if he or the police could ever help me. He said that if he wasn't there, to tell whoever answered the phone to look in his Rolodex under my name. He would leave instructions to provide me with whatever I needed. He also gave me his cell phone and told me to call if I needed his help. I don't know why fixing his problem was so important to him, but now it was going to pay off. The worst he can do is hang up on me, I thought as I dialed his cell. Ralph answered on the second ring, sounding as if I woke him up. "Jennings," he said. I told him who I was, apologized for waking him, and explained about Rebecca and my problem. "Is there anything you can do to help me find her?" "Give me your number, Jamie. I'll get back to you in 10 minutes, he answered. The 10 minutes seemed like an hour. He called back and told me that he had to put a BULO out on Rebecca's car and her description with an order to contact him if she was spotted. Ralph told that now we would just have to wait. "What's a BULO?" I asked. "It means be on the lookout, and all patrol cars will be checking for your wife's car. I made it a personal request, so we should get something soon. I know it's hard, but go home and try to take it easy. I'll be in touch," Ralph told me. "Thanks, Ralph. I owe you big time," I said. "All part of your police department at work, Jamie. Go home." I was halfway home when my phone rang. It was Ralph. "We found her and her car, Jamie. She's in the parking lot of Jackson's. It's a bar on 47th and Broadway," he said. "One of our squad cars spotted her car about 2 minutes after my BULO. Is she okay, Ralph?" I asked, almost dreading the answer. "Yeah, aside from being really drunk, she seems to be fine. From the looks and smell, she threw up in the floorboard of her car before she passed out. My boys need to call the EMTs, or you need to come get her." "I'm on my way, but I thought you said she was okay," I said, puzzled. "Yes, I did, but she's had a lot to drink. The officer said she was really out of it. He couldn't get a response from her. She could have alcohol poisoning. Your wife should be checked over by qualified medical personnel," he suggested. I knew Jackson's very well. It was the same bar that Rebecca had gone nuts in a few months ago. As I pulled in next to the police car, one of the officers came over, verified who I was, and helped me get Rebecca into my car. She looked bad and smelled worse. I took her to Hope General's ER to have them examine her. Ralph could have been right about the alcohol poisoning. While the doctor began to examine Rebecca, I filled out the necessary papers and then went to the waiting room. I sat there staring at nothing, and a nurse come over and stood in front of me. When I looked up, I recognized Nurse Mary Wells. She had been one of Rebecca's nurses the night of the motorcycle accident. We said hello to each other, and she asked what I was doing in the ER tonight. I explained that Rebecca had way too much to drink, and on advice from a friend, I thought it best to bring her to the hospital. Mary agreed that it was a smart decision. You know, it's funny. Well, not funny, maybe strange is a better term. But it's been 1 year ago today that Mrs. O'Connor had her accident. I checked the records when she came in. Isn't that strange or ironic or weird or something? Let me go check and see how she's doing for you. I'll be right back. Did this all have something to do with that accident? Was that why Rebecca went on a bender tonight? Everything seemed to revolve around that night a year ago. Rebecca's strange behavior started then. I needed to find out what caused her to almost kill herself on the bike. While Mary was finding out about Rebecca's condition, I began to think about the last time she had gotten out of control drunk. Strange, it was in the same bar. That night I had wondered how far Rebecca would have gone with that guy if I hadn't interfered. Tonight I hadn't been there, and I wondered if she had gone too far. Had Rebecca reverted to her free-spirited college days, at least for this one evening? If she had returned to her wild child days, it would mean the end of our marriage. I wouldn't live that way back then, and I'd be damned if I'd put up with it now. Mary came back and told me that Rebecca would be fine. They would get the excess alcohol out of her system and keep her overnight. I thanked her for taking the time to help me and asked if she could do a favor for me. She looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to explain. Without going into our entire history, I told her about Rebecca's last drunken binge and what happened. I asked her if she could check or have Rebecca check to see if she'd had sex that evening. Mary was a little surprised, first by my request and second because I would want to know if she had. Mary, if she was with another man tonight and confesses tomorrow when I confront her, I believe I can handle it and we can get past it. I love her very much. However, if I find out about it later and she has lied to me, I don't know if I could forgive and forget. Nurse Wells looked at me for a full minute, trying to decide on what to do or say. I know it's a lot to throw on you. I mean, we're not exactly close friends, but we really need some help here. Please, Mary, it could save our marriage. I laid it on thick. I wasn't proud of myself, using and misleading Nurse Wells. One thing I had told Mary was true. If Rebecca had sex tonight, our marriage was over. Mary nodded and said she would run the test while they were prepping Rebecca for the treatment and let me know in about an hour. Whatever happens, I owe that nurse. I'll have to think of some way of thanking her. It was an hour to the minute when Mary came back to me, bringing a large cup of coffee and with a smile on her face. Here, this is from my private stash, she said, handing me the coffee. I guess the only thing you'll have to talk about is why Mrs. O'Connor got so drunk, she told me with a big grin. She didn't have sex with anyone but a bottle of Jack Daniels tonight. I sort of slumped down in my chair and put my face in my hands. Mary patted me on the back and told me that I could see Rebecca in about 20 minutes, but the hospital would keep her overnight, and that after seeing her I should go home and get some rest. The ER staff pumped Rebecca's stomach to get rid of excess alcohol, and I was able to see her before I went home. She was out of it, and I don't know if she even knew I was there. A combination of her treatment and the residual alcohol in her system. The next afternoon, I took her home and put her to bed. She was in no condition to talk right then, but a talk was coming, and this time I was going to get some answers. The next morning, I put coffee, water, and aspirin on the nightstand just like the last time. But no mimosa. She'd had enough alcohol for a while. It was 1 o'clock before Rebecca came out of our bedroom after taking a shower. She wore a terry cloth robe and was still toweling her hair dry. I handed her another cup of coffee and sat down across from her. Okay, now, how about an explanation for last night? Confronting her. Rebecca didn't answer, she just sat there looking at the floor. This poor little me. Hungover act isn't gonna work this time, Becky. I want some answers, and you're going to give them to me. Now, what was last night all about? Nothing. I just stopped to have a drink and let it get away from me. What's the big deal? I wasn't driving and didn't hurt anyone. I would have come home after I sobered up. Rebecca said defensively. I thought you were going to that charity meeting last night. Did any of the others neglect to call their husbands or wives to tell them where they were? Did any of the others get so hammered that they threw up in their car before they passed out? Did any of the others have to be taken to an ER to get treated for alcohol poisoning? Stop, please stop. I don't feel well. Please let's talk about it tomorrow. Please, Jamie, she pleaded with me. I didn't like attacking her, but I needed some answers about what was causing her actions. No, Becky, we'll talk about it now. Were you really at a meeting, or did you go directly to the bar after work? She didn't answer. She wasn't ignoring me, but she didn't answer. Rebecca pulled her knees up and put her arms around them and just sat there staring off into space. Damn it, Becky, answer me. Do you go to a meeting, or did you meet that a-hole again? You know, the one you almost made out with at that same bar. Rebecca began to sob. I don't mean just crying, but sobbing as if her heart was broken. No, I didn't meet anyone. Please believe me, I was by myself, she answered. Then she continued crying and rocked back and forth in her chair. At first, her crying hadn't bothered me. I wanted answers. But this sobbing, the defensive position of her body, and the rocking back and forth warned me that I might be going too far. I'm sorry, honey. I've been interrogating you instead of talking to you. I'll go for a walk, Becky, and be back in an hour. Take a few minutes to calm down, and when I come back, let's talk. Just talk. We have to get whatever is bothering you out in the open. I didn't actually take a walk. I got a cup of coffee and a cigar and went to the park across from Out Hotel and sat on a bench for an hour. The stress of last night, the past couple of months, hell of the last year had got to me. Rebecca and I had to get rid of whatever demons that were causing her actions. Our relationship and our marriage depended on it. After an hour, I had finished the coffee and cigar and went back up to the apartment. I was hoping for a resolution to our problems. Rebecca wasn't on the sofa when I walked in. I found her asleep lying across our bed, still wearing the robe. Her face was smooth with the frown or worry lines she had earlier. She looked about 17 years old. So much for a resolution to our problems, at least for tonight. In a way, I was glad she fell asleep. She was in a bad mental state, and I was so angry that I might have done damage to our marriage that couldn't be fixed. But this wasn't over. Rebecca was going to tell either me or a therapist what was going on. Our marriage depended on that also. I spelt in the guest room that night, but sometime during the night Rebecca crawled into my bed and spooned up against me. She was still asleep with a little smile on her face when I got up the next morning. I let her sleep, left her a note telling her I loved her, and went to work. Around 10, I received a call from the inner sanctum. Sylvia was on the line. She told me that Jason would like to see me as soon as I could get away. Sylvia, give Jason a message for me, will you? Tell him that if he wants to see me about business, I'll be right up. If he wants to talk about Rebecca and me, tell him to go to hell. Will you do that for me, Sylvia? I'd had enough of his meddling. Are you sure you want to tell your boss to go to hell, Jamie? She inquired. I can change the part about him being my boss very quickly. I'm not taking any more of his crap. Please give him the message exactly the way I said. Okay. The response from on high took less than 5 minutes. Jason walked into my office. He closed my door and took a chair in front of my desk. Looking at me, he shook his head and then smiled. I started to say something, but he held up his hand to stop me. Please, Jamie, let me have my say, and then I'll go to hell like you suggested. He laughed as he said the last part. I want you to know that Rebecca wasn't with a man or anyone else the other night, or any other night for that matter. She sat at the bar and got blitzed all by herself. A few guys tried to talk to her, tried to get her to dance, but she refused every one of them. She even got nasty and poured a drink in one guy's lap because he wouldn't take no for an answer. Sam, you know, the big bartender, escorted the man out. How do you know all this, Jason? Did you have her followed? I couldn't believe he would have his own daughter followed. Yes, I did have her followed. Someone's followed her every night that she wasn't with you. His answer really surprised me. Why would you do that? The main reason is that I could tell something is bothering Rebecca has been ever since her accident. It may have started before the wreck. Hell, it might be what caused the wreck. I had her followed to protect her when you weren't there. Jason caught my interest with his answer. I know, none of my business, right? Well, Rebecca, and now you, are all I have, and I'm going to protect what's mine. If that bothers you, just deal with it. I love her more than is good for me, and she loves you. So you're part of the family whether you like it or not." His revelation really surprised me. I knew he liked me before Rebecca and I got together, and he was really happy that Rebecca and I got married, but I didn't know the way he felt about me. "You said the main reason. What's the other reason?" Jason said, "I don't want you to make the same mistake that I did with Rebecca's mother. I guess you've heard the rumors that she ran off with her personal trainer?" I nodded and he said, "That's not quite the real story." He went on with the story, saying that he was driven to make a financial empire and didn't give Sadie, Rebecca's mother, the attention she needed or deserved. It wasn't that he didn't love her, but his business came first. Sadie tried different hobbies to pass the time, waiting for his love and attention. One of the things she did was start going to a gym. She met Carl at the gym. He was a personal trainer. He started working with Sadie and they became friends. They talked while she worked out, and she started telling him about Jason and how lonely she felt. Carl smelled blood and went in for the kill. He persuaded Sadie to meet him for lunch 2 or 3 times, and then started asking her out to dinner or dancing. Just as good friends, he claimed. Sadie believed in her marriage vows and felt that an evening with Carl was stepping over the line. A few lunches were harmless. One evening, a group from the gym went to have a drink. There was about 10 of them, including Sadie. She didn't know it until she got to the bar that Carl was going to be there too. Carl put the moves on her all night, trying to get her to drink more, trying to get her to dance with him, and trying to get close to her sitting at the table. Sadie realized that Carl wasn't interested in a friendship. Carl wanted a bed partner. She was relatively young, but she wasn't stupid. Sadie left the bar early and the next day quit the gym. She never saw Carl again. But the damage had been done. Someone that knew both Sadie and Jason saw Carl put his arm around her sitting at the table and jumped to the wrong conclusion. If the woman had waited just a few seconds, she would have seen Sadie push Carl's arm off her shoulders and heard her telling him to keep his hands to himself. That friend couldn't wait to tell Jason about his wife and Carl. Jason went crazy when he heard about it. He confronted Sadie but wouldn't believe her that nothing had happened. After all, he had an eyewitness, he told her. Before Sadie knew it, she was served with divorce papers. She tried to talk to Jason, but he told her to talk to his attorney. Because of his power and influence, Jason got custody of Rebecca. The court did order him to pay alimony, but every check that was sent to Sadie was returned. Jason made it difficult for Sadie to see Rebecca, and finally Sadie moved out of state. She always sent cards and presents to Rebecca for her birthday and Christmas, but that was her only contact with her daughter. 2 years after the divorce, Jason finally learned the truth about what happened that night. He was filled with remorse at the mess he had made of the lives of Sadie, Rebecca, and yes, his life too. By this time, Jason was exceedingly wealthy, so he hired a private investigator to find Sadie. It was too late. Sadie had been killed in an auto accident 3 weeks before the PI could find her. So that's my sad story. I was a moron, and it cost Rebecca her mother. It cost me a loving wife, and it cost Sadie her life. She would have never been in that car if I hadn't run her off. Jason stopped for several seconds, and Jamie saw him wipe tears out of his eyes. That's one of the reasons I had Rebecca followed. I knew something was wrong after her accident because of her excessive drinking, and I wasn't going to let you make the same mistake I had because some friend was trying to help. Considering Rebecca's previous lifestyle, you might have believed such a report. You underestimate me, Jason. I wouldn't believe rumors. But what if Rebecca had hooked up with some guy? Would you have told me? No, because it wasn't going to happen. If it looked like someone was going to take advantage of her, my people would have stopped it before it happened. They are well paid and had orders to interrupt if things began to get out of hand. Up to and including kicking some guy's bum. My first reaction was anger and resentment for Jason putting himself into our lives. But after his story, I understood that he was trying to help because he loves his daughter. I stared at him without speaking for what seemed like a long time. Finally, I just shook my head and smiled at him. Okay, Jason, I understand that you love your daughter, but it's our marriage and I need you to stay out of it. We'll handle the problems and get by them, or we won't, but it's our decision as to what happens. He nodded, stood up, and we shook hands. As he left my office, he said, I'm on my way to hell now, just like I promised. Rebecca hadn't gone to work, not surprising, and that evening when I got home, she had our dinner on the table. I know she ordered it from the hotel kitchen, but at least she made the effort to set the table. She had cleaned herself up and was wearing a bare minimum of makeup. Other than the dark circles under her eyes, she looked very nice. We talked about inconsequential things during dinner, how my job was going, and the charities we were involved in. We talked about anything and everything but the previous evening's escapade. I told her that since she had made the dinner I would clean up. I was teasing her and actually got a small, timid smile from her. I poured myself 2 fingers of Gentleman Jack and looked at Rebecca to see if she wanted a drink. She shook her head no and for the first time addressed the 400-pound gorilla in the room. "God, no. I think I had more than enough last night," she said, surprising me. She sat down on the sofa close to me. That's encouraging, I thought. At least she wants to be near me. We sat for a few minutes and I reached over and took her hand. "Can we talk about last night, Becky? I promise not to verbally attack you or berate you. But I need to understand what's going on with you. I need to understand why you would drink yourself into a stupor. Please, can we discuss this?" I spoke softly. I didn't want her to get all defensive and shut down again. I don't know what to say. After the meeting, a group of us went to have a drink, and before I knew it, I was the only one left. I know I should have left when the others did, but I just kept on drinking. And I can't tell you why I didn't come home, or at least call you, Rebecca admitted. "Why did you need to keep on drinking?" "Something's eating at you, and I can't help you until I know what it is," I said, still using a soft voice and tone. "I don't know what makes me drink like that. Don't you think if I knew I would tell you?" "Please, Jamie. I'm sorry. Can't we just let it go? I promise I won't drink like that again," Rebecca pleaded. She looked so sad, so scared, and so pitiful that I wanted to just say, "Okay," and take her in my arms. I did take her in my arms, but whispered to her, "We can't just let it go, Becky. This is the second time in a few months that you've gone totally overboard. Not to mention the nights I've had to help you home because you drank too much." Rebecca tried to pull away from me, but I held her close and continued. "You need help, and if you won't talk to me, you need to talk to a therapist. I'm losing my mind worrying about you. The uncertainty of what you'll do next is killing me. Please, Becky, go see someone, get help, before it's too late for us." Now I was the one pleading. I let her pull back from me and saw tears in her eyes again. She nodded and then came back into my arms. I held her and stroked her hair and her back. We were still on the sofa, holding on to each other the next morning. As I was rushing to get ready for work, I reminded Rebecca about her promise to find professional help. She said she didn't know anyone, and I suggested she call her regular doctor. "He doesn't do that kind or work," she replied. "No, but he'll know someone he can refer you to. I don't want everyone to know what I'm doing. They'll think I'm crazy," Rebecca said. "Your doctor won't tell anyone, patient confidentiality," I assured her. She nodded acceptance, and I told her I would see her tonight. Rebecca was taking another couple of days off work. That evening, I causally asked if her doctor had been able to refer her to someone. She said she forgot to call him, using the excuse that her father and several people from work had called to see how she was doing. Rebecca promised to call him in the next day or so. 1 week later, I asked again about her doctor's referral. She said that she had the number of a therapist and would call the first of the week to set up an appointment. I waited until Tuesday before I asked her about the therapist. "I'm feeling much better, Jamie. Do you really think it's necessary for me to waste time seeing a therapist? There's nothing wrong with me that a little self-control can't cure." Quietly, softly, I reminded her of our discussion and her promise. "Please call and get help, Becky. I'm still worried about you." She seemed a little upset and pouted, but finally agreed to call the therapist the next day. 2 more days went by, and she didn't say anything, so I asked her if she had made an appointment. "Yes, Jamie, I made an appointment," she answered sarcastically. "The first appointment I could get was at the end of next month." I kissed her, thanked her for keeping her promise, and suggested we go out to dinner. Her suggestion was that we have a small supper at home and stay in. She said she needed some exercise, and I was just the one to give it to her. Her suggestion was the better of the two, so that's what we did. It was the first time we made love since her visit to the ER. The next morning at my office, I got to thinking that another month and a half was a long time for Rebecca to wait. Rebecca and I had both signed medical power of attorneys and release of information forms so that we could give medical information and make decisions concerning treatments for each other. Maybe if I called her doctor, Dr. Phillips, he might be able to get her a closer appointment. I didn't have any special influence with Dr. Phillips, other than being Rebecca's husband, but Jason might. And Dr. Phillips certainly knew who he was. Jason had donated the money to set up a clinic for a group of doctors, one of which was Dr. Phillips. I called his office, and his receptionist told me, "Hold one moment." "Hi, Jamie. Nice to hear from you. By the way, how's Rebecca feeling?" "She's close to being her old self. That's why I called Dr. Phillips. The therapist you referred Rebecca to gave her an appointment over a month away. I was wondering if you could do something to move it up. That's a long time to wait, don't you know?" "Jamie, I haven't seen or talked to Rebecca for almost a year. The last time was the 1-month follow-up after her accident. I didn't give her a referral. I don't understand," he answered. I was surprised. No, surprised isn't the word. Stunned is a better word to describe the way I felt. I told Dr. Phillips that she must have used the company doctor and that I would contact him. Rebecca had flat out lied to me. It was obvious that she wasn't going to get help. I wondered how long she would keep up this charade. Would she pretend to go to therapy for a few months and then say she was cured? At this point, I was beyond upset, beyond mad. I felt cheated, which is much worse. Well, tonight we would have this out. "No more, please, Jamie. Either she would get help or what? What would I do? Would I leave her over this? How could I help her if I left? But how could I help her if she continued to scheme and lie to me? I really was at a loss as to what to do. My father always told me that if I had a problem that I couldn't solve, find someone smarter or who knew about the thing that was stumping you and pick their brain. There was one person that knew my problem and was very smart too. "Hi, Sylvia. Is Jason in, and if he is, can I come up to see him?" If anyone knew the problem almost as good as I did, it was Rebecca's father. "Yes, he's in, Jamie. You want to tell him to go to hell again?" Sylvia had gotten a big kick out of my response to Jason the last time he called me to his office. "Come on up. If he's busy, I'll kick whoever's in his office out the door." I didn't say anything when I entered Jason's office. He watched as I walked to the bar, poured 2 drinks, and sat down, putting one of the drinks in front of him. "Problem?" he said. Then I gave him the whole story, Rebecca's mood swings, her drinking, and finally her lying about seeing a therapist. Jason got up after I finished and poured us both another drink. "I guess you don't want me to stay out of your marriage now, do you?" Jason said. "Go to hell, Jason," I yelled and stood up to leave. "Jamie, I am sorry. Please sit down, please. It was a bad joke. I should have realized how stressed out you are. Please come back and sit down. We'll figure out something," Jason said, apologizing. I grabbed the other drink, sat down, and told Jason all about Rebecca's game playing and lying to me about the appointment with a therapist. We went over the things she had been doing and how she had been acting for the last year. Apparently, her behavior was keyed to the motorcycle accident. I told him that the doctors said she had recovered fully from the injuries that she sustained in the wreck. Jason and I talked for 30 minutes, and he said, "Well, we haven't really come up with anything to do. I don't know how you, can force her to go to therapy if she refuses to go. I've decided that I'm going to give her an ultimatum, Jason. Either she gets help or I'm leaving her." I didn't expect Rebecca's father to agree with my choice of action. Before he could protest, I said, "I'm hoping it will make her realize how serious this is. But make no mistake about it, if she doesn't get help, I'll leave. I can't live like this." Jason tried to get me to change my mind without success. I had made up my mind. I couldn't live with the drunken binges, the lying, and the schemes to deceive me. If a marriage didn't have trust, it couldn't survive, and I didn't trust Rebecca anymore. It wasn't that I was afraid that she would go to bed with some other guy or guys. I was afraid that I would get a phone call telling me that she had been killed in an accident or died from an overdose of alcohol or drugs. After dinner that evening, I decided to give Rebecca a chance to admit that she didn't have a therapist lined up. I could have just confronted her, but felt that if I did, that she would get defensive and react badly. We were on the sofa enjoying being close to each other. "Becky, I wonder if the therapist you're gonna go to is covered by our insurance. What's her name? And I'll check tomorrow. And if she isn't, we can find one that's acceptable to the insurance company." She acted a little startled and then got nervous. "Oh, I already checked and she's on the covered list, so we're good." "Good. Might as well use the insurance instead of paying out of pocket. You never did tell me her name. What is it?" Rebecca hesitated for a few seconds and then answered, "Her name is Dr. Helen Thomas." And this is the one referred by Dr. Phillips? Yeah, he gave me the name of 3 doctors and I picked this one because she's a woman. I thought I might feel more comfortable with another woman. Why all the questions? I had hoped that before I got this far in my test that Rebecca would have admitted to what she had done. Because I talked to Dr. Phillips today. I hoped he could get you an appointment sooner than next month. Rebecca's face went pale, and I heard her mutter something like, "Oh no." Funny thing, Becky, Dr. Phillips said he hadn't talked to you for almost a year. Why did you lie to me? She started crying softly and finally said, "I thought if I put it off you would leave me alone. I don't want or need therapy." Rebecca hung her head waiting for my reaction, I guess. I had to wait a little so I could control my anger at her lies and deception. Before I could say anything, I saw a change come over Rebecca. She sat up taller and the tears were gone. "How dare you set me up like this?" She was angry. "I wouldn't have done it except you lied to me. You deliberately told me that you had taken steps to see a therapist. So don't get huffy with me. You're the one that's guilty of lying." We went back and forth for the next 10 minutes and finally I'd had enough. "Becky, I'm begging you. Please see a therapist if you can't talk to me." "No, damn it. I won't see some shrink. There's nothing wrong with me." "Now shut the hell up about it," she yelled at me. "There is something bothering you. Physically you may be fine, but something is running around inside your head, causing you to act this way." I argued calmly, or as calm as I could as I watched our relationship fall apart. "Are you accusing me of having an affair, or just saying that I'm crazy?" "No, I'm saying that you've changed from the happy, strong, loving woman that I married into someone else. The change is tied into your bike wreck somehow. You're always staring off into space. Your work is suffering to the point that if Jason wasn't your father, they would have let you go. That night at Jackson's when you let that a-hole get too close to you. And this last drunken binge tell me that something or someone has caused you to change. I'm just a little off right now, that's all. I'm not having an affair nor am I crazy, and I won't go to a shrink that will claim I am just to pad her fee. I'm not going. Do you hear? Now shut up about it," she yelled. "Becky, I love you, but I can't take this anymore. I'm giving you 2 weeks to start therapy." That sounds like an ultimatum. It sounds like there's an or else in there. Or else what, Jamie? Rebecca was in total attack mode now. "Please, honey, just get some help." I dodged her question. "Or else what, dear?" She said dear so sarcastically it hurt me. Speaking in a softer voice, I said, "I've already told you that I'm worried about you. So is Jason, by the way. And I've asked you several times to talk to me or get help. I'm getting to the point that I don't trust you anymore and I can't and won't live like this. If you don't start with a therapist, I'm leaving you." "You wouldn't dare," she said. Rebecca was in full attack mode now. "You like my money too much to leave. You couldn't give up all the perks of being married to the boss's daughter. You won't leave because you enjoy this little apartment, the company car, and all the other things you have because of me. And you won't leave because you like screwing me." Sadly, I shook my head. How had we gotten to this point? Maybe I should have told her that I knew she was lying instead of using her own words against her. Maybe I should have just accepted her mood swings, continued to watch over her, and let things run their course. But then again, that course was running into a deep hole for her. I've tried to help you and stayed with you because I love you, not because of money or prestige, or even because of the sex, which there hasn't been much of recently. And if you remember, I already had this apartment and the company car before you came back. I paused to push the anger I felt down after her tirade. "Since you think the sex is one of the reasons I'm staying, I'll move into the guest room for the next 2 weeks. Tomorrow, I'll give notice at work and begin gathering my personal possessions to take with me." The Becky I married would never have said the things you just said. You have a problem that you won't get help with, or you've gone back to your the Princess Coleman persona. In either case, I'm not staying around. I grabbed what I would need to go to work the next morning and moved into the guest room. The whole time Rebecca was harping at me that I didn't love her, only her money, or that I was the one that was crazy, or that I would be nothing without her, and lastly that I was walking away from the best piece of shit that I would ever have. Finally, I couldn't hold my temper any longer. "You know, maybe you're the one that's nuts, Becky. You must be to say shit like that to me. I don't have to give you 2 weeks. I can leave right away if you like. Just say the word and I'm out of here." I started yelling and caught myself. "Go ahead and go. You want to go, then go," she screamed back at me. I should have just gone into the guest room and shut the door. I should have realized that Rebecca was mad and didn't really want me to go in spite of what she said. But I didn't. I let the emotional turmoil override my good sense. Packing a small suitcase with the stuff I already had in the guest room, I walked to the door as Rebecca watched me with the first signs of fear and maybe regret on her face. Remember, when this is all over, it was you that caused it. You have a problem that you refuse to deal with, you won't talk to me or get professional help, and you lied and deceived me. This is all on you. I'll come back and get the rest of my stuff when you're at work over the next few days. It's impossible to slam a self-closing door like the one on our apartment, but I tried and then got madder when I couldn't slam it. In the lobby, I saw Jacob, our concierge, was still on duty. I stopped to ask him to bring my car around. He looked at my face and at my suitcase, said he was sorry, and called the garage for my car. During the next week, I went back to the apartment and moved my clothes and other personal items to a hotel. I also had my friend George take me home, so I could move my Harley to a secure storage facility. If I did have to leave, I didn't want it left behind. 1 week to the day after I left and moved into a hotel close to my office, I received a phone call from Jacob. It was surprising because he had never called me at my office before. "I'm sorry to bother you at work, but I think you should know what happened this last week concerning Mrs. O'Connor," he said. "It's okay, Jacob. What's going on with Rebecca?" "Well, Jamie, 3 of the last 7 evenings, Mrs. O'Connor came home in a taxi. She had apparently had too much to drink. Twice I helped her up to your apartment. I know it's none of my business, but I thought you should know," Jacob finished. "Was she alone when she came home, or was there a man with her?" Maybe it was an unfair question, but I had to know. "No, sir. She was always alone," he answered. I thanked him for his concern and hung up. The phone barely touched down and it rang again. "Storm warnings, Jamie. You better prepare yourself for bad weather," Sylvia said. "Storm warnings? What the hell are you, Tal?" "Oh, I understand," I said as Rebecca stomped into my office. "Thanks, Sylvia. I appreciate it." I hung up and looked up at Rebecca standing in front of my desk. "Aren't you going to offer me a chair?" "Have a seat, Becky," I said, pointing to a chair. "What can I do for you? Are you ready to stop this nonsense and come back home?" She asked. "Are you ready to get some help?" I responded. "I keep telling you that there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not crazy and I don't need help. And I keep telling you that there is something bothering you. You've been drunk several times this last week. Doesn't that show you something's wrong? I've never said you're crazy, just that you need help. Look, I'll make a deal with you. Go see a therapist, and if he or she tells me that I'm wrong, I'll move back home and forget about all this stuff. You say you're okay. We'll have a therapist slap me in the face with that fact." Rebecca avoided an answer and said, "I was just talking to Daddy. He said that you told him that you might be leaving the company." "Why?" "If we can't solve our differences, then I'm going to leave you. If I do that, I can't keep working here, or even keep living in this city." "Why?" "Everything here, from my job to all the places and things we love about this town, would just remind me of what we've lost. I couldn't face that day to day, so I'll move someplace where I don't have those memories," I answered sadly. "We can work all this out, Jamie. You don't have to leave the city. You don't have to leave me," Rebecca said just as sadly. "Please stay. Don't you love me anymore? If you think I want this, then you're crazy. Sorry, bad choice of words. I mean, you're wrong. And I love you more now than when we got married. But no, we can't work it out. I think you need help. You say you don't and refuse to get help. I love you too much, or maybe it's that I'm not strong enough to watch you destroy yourself," I told her with tears in my eyes. She hung her head for a little while and said, "I'm sorry about what I said about the money and all that stuff. I know it isn't true. I was just mad. I know, that wasn't why I left. I was just tired of fighting with you. Can I kiss you before I go?" Rebecca asked. I walked around the desk, and as she stood up, I took her in my arms. The kiss was tender and loving and very sad. Rebecca sobbed and ran out of my office. I wasn't in much better shape and sat down before my legs gave out. The end of the 2 weeks came, and on Friday, I went up to say goodbye to Jason. Rebecca and I hadn't spoken since that day in my office. Sylvia stood and gave me a hug before she waved me into his office. Jason looked up as I walked in and motioned me over to the seating area in front of his bar. He poured us both a drink and said, "So it's that time, I guess." I nodded and handed him some papers and keys. He looked at me puzzled and with a question in his eyes. That's the company stock you gave me as a wedding present. I've included a power of attorney transferring them back to you. The keys are for the company car and the apartment. Although I guess Rebecca will stay on there. Will it do any good to talk about this? Is there anything I can say or do to get you to stay? Jason knew the answers, but he was grasping at straws. I shook my head no. Thanks for everything, Jason. You gave me a wonderful opportunity with JCOL, and I appreciate it. Any idea where you're going? Not really. West maybe. I've always wanted to spend some time by the ocean. Maybe the Rocky Mountains. I don't know. So long, Jason, I said. I shook his hand, walked out of his office, and away from my life. As I passed through her office, Sylvia gave me a hug and said she hoped I would find some peace now. The next morning, I packed a few necessities in the saddlebags and climbed on my Harley. The road I'm traveling on ends in AITA intersection. I'm at a crossroads, both literally and figuratively. If I turn left and head west, I start a life on my own and without my wife. If I turn right and head east, I can go back to my wife and to the problems we're having. There doesn't seem to be a viable solution to them, so I don't see the upside to turning right. I've been poor and then became rich working for JCOL, and now I'm poor again. Well, comparatively speaking, rich is better, believe me, but not at the cost of my peace of mind. It felt like I was running away, and I didn't like the feeling, but I've tried for almost a year to resolve the problem. Apparently it can't be resolved. Time for me to head west to a new life, I decided. Maybe in time I can get over losing Rebecca. I don't think so, but maybe. I started my trek west toward the Pacific Ocean. San Diego was my final destination. I had a reason for traveling to that part of the California coast. I had a couple of friends from college who lived there, and they had a small IT systems consulting firm. They might have room for another consultant, and if not, there were other firms I could work for. Gary Simpson and Jake Adams were very surprised when I walked into their little storefront office. "What the hell are you doing here? Where did you come from? What are you doing here? And how the hell are you?" they said while greeting me. It was good to see my classmates again. We had loosely stayed in touch since graduation. We went to a bar and grill called Tully's. Over lunch, I explained about my separation from Rebecca without going into a lot of detail and told them I was going to live the good life in San Diego. "Got room in your company for a broken-down old IT dude?" Jake looked at Gary and somewhat hesitantly said, "Sorry, Jamie, we can't afford another consultant right now. I mean, we're making a decent profit, but it's just enough for the two of us. If it was just us, we'd pull in our horns a little and hire you anyway, but we both have families to take care of. I wish..." "Hey, Jake, I've got an idea that's a win-win for both of us. Hire me on a commission basis. Don't pay me a salary, but a percentage of the profit. Say 20% for any work I do for your existing clients. When I bring in new customers and work, give me 50% of the profit." I stopped as the waitress brought our drinks. "The new business is all gravy for you guys anyway," I continued. "All I need is desk space and a workstation. Hell, I'll even pay for the workstation. Your guys get the talents of an IT specialist that can handle systems analysis and maintenance, software applications, and the hardware side too. You get this miracle man and only pay for the work done without the expense of a salary. What did you say, boys?" You could see the wheels turning as they thought about my offer. I told them to talk it over and excused myself to use the bathroom. I took my time and even got another round of drinks from the bar as I returned to the table. I had taken about 15 minutes to give Gary and Jake a chance to discuss my proposal. As I sat back down, Jake said, "You've got a deal, Jamie. Let's go have a steak and celebrate this evening. Are you sure your better halves will let you out tonight?" I ragged on them a little. Jake answered, "Not a problem. We rule our houses with an iron fist, don't you know?" He chuckled and continued, "Actually, we married sisters and they're both visiting their folks up in Oregon, so we can live the bachelor life for 2 more days." That evening, I had 2 small drinks and switched to coffee, but the boys celebrated hard and were too drunk to drive. I drove us back to my hotel, and Jake slept on the extra bed in my room and Gary got the couch. The next morning, 2 bleary-eyed techno geeks stumbled and staggered to their car and went home. I don't think much work got done at Simpson Adams Consulting that day. I had arrived in San Diego on Tuesday and I would start work on Monday. Between Wednesday and Monday, I looked for a place to live that wouldn't take the gross national product of a small county to pay for. San Diego is an expensive place to live. I had some money put away and was getting an income from my software, but it wasn't a fortune, and I didn't want to spend everything on four walls and a roof. The Harley had come a long way. So on Wednesday, I took it to a nearby Harley dealer for service. While I waited for it, I got to talking to one of the salesmen about needing a place to stay. He gave me the name and number of a rental agent that could help. I called while at the dealership, told the guy what I was looking for, and spent the afternoon looking at some possibilities. The fourth one hit the jackpot. It was a 31-foot Airstream travel trailer sitting on a hill overlooking the beach at Encinitas. The trailer was plugged into city water and electricity and was just like a small apartment. It was at least affordable and was only about 20 miles from to my new job. I signed a 6-month lease and moved in. For months have passed and I'm doing good. Jake and Gary are very happy with our arrangement and congratulate themselves almost every week for getting me to work for them. I used some contacts that I had made while at JC Well and was able to bring in several new clients, including some monthly service contracts that are very profitable. My guys suggested that I concentrate on the new clients and they'll take care of the rest of the business. They offered to make me a partner, but I declined. However, I did sign a 3-year exclusive contract with them, renewable in 2-year increments after that. Another win-win situation. They continue to have my services and contacts, and I didn't have to worry about the month-to-month expenses it takes to run a business. I wasn't trying to hide, but I never let anyone beside my parents know where I was. There was no contact with Rebecca, Jason, or anyone from my old life. As far as anyone back in Missouri knew, I had vanished. I hadn't started divorce proceedings, and I guess neither had Rebecca. At least I didn't receive any papers to sign or a divorce decree. I finally met Shelly and Karen, Jake and Gary's wives. Nice ladies, but every 2 weeks or so they would try to set me up with some woman. That would be just perfect for me. I finally told them the partial truth that I wasn't divorced yet and wanted to wait until I was free. Actually, I was still trying to come to terms with leaving Rebecca. Jake and Gary were almost as bad and tried to get me to go out and mingle in the San Diego nightlife. I told them the same thing as I told their wives, and that I just wasn't interested. The 3 months of establishing new clients and intense work hadn't made me forget about the past, but it did help me learn to live with it. I had no plans of becoming a hermit, but I wasn't ready to do the social scene. At least not yet. During the days, and sometimes into the nights, my work and my success were like an emotional amnesia that helped me get through another day. I was healing. It wasn't complete yet, but I was healing. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was running a little late getting into work. Gary met me as I walked in the front door and said, "Not interested, huh? You're a sly one, hiding that one from us." I looked at him like he was nuts. "What the hell are you talking about? Who have I been hiding?" Jake continued, "Your lady friend. She came in looking for you, and when I offered to help her, she said it was personal. She's waiting in your office, and she's too hot to keep waiting. You better get in there." What or who were they talking about? Maybe I should go find out who they stashed at my workstation, I thought. Entering my office, I saw a woman sitting in front of my desk with her back to the door. She turned around and I was totally surprised. Maybe shocked is a better description. It was someone I never thought I would see again. Rebecca. I had heard about and even experienced conflicting emotions, but nothing like the ones I had now. She looks good. No dark circles under her eyes. She's gained back the weight she lost, and she doesn't have that haunted look, and it's nice to see her, were my first thoughts and emotions. Then the memories of the last year plus swept through my mind. The anger, disappointment, and sadness were the next set of emotions to sweep over me. The next thoughts were, why is she here? What does she want? And why can't she just leave me alone? "Hello, Jamie." She was the first to speak. "It's good to see you." It must have been 10 seconds, a long time to wait for a response, before I mentally and maybe physically shook myself enough to answer Rebecca's greeting. "Hello, Rebecca. What are you doing here?" No pleasant opening conversation, only let's get right to it, was my thought. "Rebecca? What happened to Becky?" She said with a sad little smile. "That was a different time and a different person. I don't think that woman still exists," I replied. "Too bad. I always liked you calling me Becky," she said, again giving a sad smile. "How did you find me?" She chuckled and said, "You forget who my father is." I told him that I wanted, no needed, to find you but didn't know where you were or how to contact you. "Well, you know Jason Coleman. Daddy's little girl wanted something and he got it for her. He hired a very good detective firm to find you. Pinkerton's, I think it was, and here I am. What are you doing here? I repeated. I wanted to see you, to talk to you. I thought we might have dinner or something, Rebecca said hopefully. It wasn't dinner that I wanted as I looked at Rebecca. I wanted to hold her and feel her next to me and erase the last year. I don't think that's a good idea, Rebecca, I said. How about lunch then? At least old friends could have lunch together. Old friends? I don't think old friends really describes us, I told her, for the first time letting a little of my anger show. Jake stuck his head into the office and said, Gary and I are going over to Stanton's to check on that new system we installed. I put the phones on call forwarding to my cell, and we'll lock the front door. See you later. Then he was gone before I could comment or object. Please, give me 30 minutes of your time. I really do need and want to talk to you. Please, Jamie, she pleaded with me. I knew I would have to talk to her, if only out of curiosity if nothing else, but I didn't want to do it in my office. My office was a heaven, and if we talked here, her memory would break down the door to my safe place. I'll meet you at Tooley's Bar and Grill at 5. It's across the street, I told her. Thanks, Jamie. See you at 5, she agreed. I had to walk her to the door because the guys had locked us in. As I held the door for her, she quickly leaned over and kissed my cheek. She gave me a timid smile and left. So much for getting Rebecca off my mind, I thought as I closed the door behind her. For the next hour or more I tried to get back to work, but Rebecca's sudden appearance had broken through the defensive barrier I had erected around the memories of her and our life. I accomplished nothing but staring a hole in the wall opposite my desk. Close to 3 hours after they left, Jake and Gary returned. I heard the door and went to meet them. It was sort of funny watching them almost tiptoeing trying to be quiet and looking around corners to see what was going on. It's okay, guys, she's gone. I laughed at their antics. God, I am sorry, Jamie, Jake apologized. I didn't realize that was your ex until it was too late. We would have never let her in if we had known. Don't worry about it, I said. Maybe this confrontation had to happen to put a period to that part of my life. Anyway, we're meeting tonight at Tooley's, and that will be the end of it. What did she want? Oh, sorry, that's none of my business, Jake said. Don't know. She said she wanted to talk to me. Guess I'll find out tonight what she wants. Does this mean we're going to lose our star? Gary was concerned that I would decide to leave. Are you going to move back to Missouri? Not a chance. You guys are stuck with me. At least until you don't renew our contract, I reassured them. Jake and Gary both sort of punched or patted me on the shoulder, mainly to show their support. I went back into my office and after another hour gave up trying to work as wasted time. I couldn't get my head around the job. It's good for you guys that I work on commission instead of salary because I'm sure not earning my money today, I told Jake and Gary. I'm going for a ride on the Harley and try to clear my head. See you tomorrow. I rode north along the coast on Highway 101 for several miles and then turned inland to Lake Elsinore. On a high point overlooking the lake, I mulled over what Rebecca wanted. Finally, I was able to put it out of my mind and enjoy the scenery. Time to get back, I thought. It was close to 100 miles back to my trailer to get a shower and change out of my riding clothes to meet Rebecca. Finishing my cleanup, I went back to the office to see if there were any messages. I almost expected some from the clients whose jobs I was supposed to be working on. Luckily, they didn't realize that I had played hooky that day. I sat around the office until I couldn't take it anymore and walked across the street to Tooley's. It was 4:40, so I was early, but Rebecca was already there waiting on me. She was sitting in a booth in the back and motioned me over when she saw me come in. I waved at Tommy, the bartender, as I walked past the bar. I was a regular and he knew what I liked to drink. Nodding at Rebecca, I sat down across from her, and the waitress delivered my 3 fingers of Gentleman Jack. Rebecca had a small glass of wine, but shook her head when I pointed at it to see if she wanted another glass. I limit myself to 1 glass of wine per outing, she said. Then she asked the waitress for iced tea. Thanks for meeting me, Jamie. It's important to me. Okay, you're welcome. Now what do you want? I wasn't going to cut her any slack. You never contacted a lawyer to begin divorce proceeds. Why not? She went right to the heart. When I realized that you were really gone, I expected to be served. I never said I was going to divorce you. I said I would leave. I knew this wasn't what she was getting at, but I wasn't going to tell her the truth. Please, Jamie, why didn't you divorce me? You had the grounds and it wasn't about money, in spite of me saying those horrible things to you. Why didn't you kick me to the curb, as they say? I guess I didn't see the need. I wasn't planning on getting involved in a serious relationship or getting married again, so there was no point in going through all the legal bullshit, I answered. I didn't want to tell her that I still loved her and couldn't think about someone to take her place. Jamie, I asked you for 30 minutes, but I may need more time to tell you everything I need and want to tell you. Can I have more time? I stared at her for a few seconds before answering. I don't think it's a good idea, Rebecca. It won't solve anything or make anything go away. Let's finish our drinks and leave. Rebecca looked a little grim and said, I haven't even scratched the surface here. When you worked at JCUL, you made deals every day. You negotiated prices on IT hardware and worked out deals with suppliers to the company's advantage, right? I nodded without answering. I didn't have a clue as to where she was going with this. I'll make you a deal, Mr. Wheeler Dealer. Let's take that beautiful Harley of yours for a ride to someplace quiet where we can talk. Give me the time I need to say what I have to say, even if it takes a couple of hours. Do that and I'll leave, never bother you again, and sign off on any divorce terms you want. Rebecca looked at me hopefully. As I thought about her proposal, I took a closer look at Rebecca. This wasn't the same woman that I'd most recently known. She was more in control, calmer, and more mature. Not in age, but in her actions and the way she carried herself. I had to admit to myself that I was curious about what she had to say. I'll make you a counter-offer. Let's go back to the office and talk there. Jake and Gary have gone for the day and won't be back. Their wives won't let them come back to work once they get home. And we can get some decent coffee. Will that do? Rebecca nodded, and we walked over to the office, leaving her car in Thule's parking lot. I unlocked the door and motioned her in. Then we went into our small conference room. It had the most comfortable chairs. Okay, you got your deal. What did you come all the way from Missouri to tell me in person that you couldn't have done on the phone? Rebecca looked at me for a couple of seconds, sighed, and started to talk, saying she had to talk to me in person, that she thought I deserved that much. Continuing, she said it took her 2 weeks to realize that I was really gone. She thought I was bluffing and would come back in a few days. It took her another week to decide that maybe she did need help, and then it took another week to get an appointment with a therapist. You went to see a therapist? I asked, surprised at the revelation and a little angry. Why didn't you see one before I left? It wouldn't have worked. I wouldn't have let a therapist help, just to spite you. To get the help I needed, I had to be the one to ask for it. Not because you forced me to. Please let me say my piece, and then I'll answer any questions you have. After all, I'm on the clock here, Rebecca replied with a smile. She continued, telling me that she had learned a lot about herself in the sessions with the psychologist. 3 sessions a week for 3 months. Her wild life in college and afterwards was a rebellion against her father because he had thrown her mother out and Rebecca never saw her again. She reminded me of the sexual assault she experienced in Europe and the resulting STDs she got. For the first time, Rebecca began to cry. I got a box of tissues for her and waited for her to continue. I know you remember the motorcycle accident, and you always said the accident was behind whatever was bothering me. Well, you were partially right. I received the results of my fertility test that day, and my shock and shame led me to ride too fast and carelessly. I missed a curve and almost killed myself. Rebecca stopped to wipe her nose. From your reaction, I would guess that the test showed you couldn't have babies. But that's no reason go crazy, I replied. The test did show that I was infertile, but what made me go nuts and ride so fast was the reason behind my infertility. I couldn't give you children because the STDs had made me sterile. I couldn't have babies because I had run around screwing every guy I wanted. It wasn't really those 3 men's fault. I had been teasing all 3 of them that night. I got just what I deserved. Bullshit. No one deserves to be treated the way you were. I almost yelled. It made me furious at those 3 Italian a-holes that had assaulted her. The sad part is that it wasn't the first time it happened. Remember how we met? You saved me from those 3 guys that attacked me. The reason they got rough is I had been teasing them too, and they decided to take what I had been flaunting at them all evening. But they didn't count on my white knight, did they? I had to smile at the nickname she gave me back then and at the memory of our time together. Coming back to the present, I said, why did you let that test bother you so much? I would have still loved you. children or not. Yes, you would have, because of the type of man you are. I knew you would be disappointed, but would still love me. But I felt guilty because of the reason for my infertility. I lost you once in college because of my screwing around, and after finding you again, I couldn't give you the family that you wanted because of my screwing around. Now the waterworks really came. I had to wait it out until she was able to continue talking. I didn't know it then, but the therapist has helped me to find the reasons for my actions after that accident. It seems that I felt guilty about not giving you kids, but then I got mad at you for making me feel guilty. I would act crazy, like that night at Jackson's, and would feel guilty some more and then be mad at you again. It was a vicious circle that I couldn't break. Rebecca stopped to use the bathroom, and I made coffee while she was gone. We just sat thinking our own thoughts until the coffee was ready. Emotions had been running very high for both of us, and we needed a short break. Once we had cups of coffee, Rebecca went on. I know it sounds like psychobabble, but I believe that's what happened. Once the psychologist helped me dig that out, I began to feel better, more in control and calmer, she finished. Or so I thought. Do you know there are 2 things I've lost that meant the most to me? Don't have any idea? What 2 things are you talking about? I was stumped. I lost a good man that loved me enough to put up with my bullshit for over a year, and didn't leave until I forced him to. That's the more important of the 2. But I lost something else that I loved too. I lost my motorcycle. Rebecca sat for a minute, quietly drinking her coffee. Well, I guess my time's up. I've said everything I flew out here to say. Thinking about all that Rebecca had told me, I was gratified that I had known something was eating at her, but I was terribly sad at what it had cost me. What it had cost us. We can get you a new bike, Becky, I told her. Rebecca looked at me, gave me the biggest smile I'd ever seen, and jumped onto my lap. For the next few minutes, we just held each other and cried. Well, she cried, but I must have gotten something in my eye. After several minutes, she got up and grabbed her bag that had been sitting on the desk. She pulled out a large envelope and handed it to me. I promised myself that if a miracle happened and we got back together, that I would give you this. Go ahead, open it, she prodded me. I opened the envelope and poured the contents onto the desk. It was a bunch of paper that had been put through a shredder. What's this? That's the prenups we signed before we got married. I didn't want them then and don't now. And don't worry about Daddy. He loaned me the shredder in his office. Come on, I want to show you my bachelor pad. You'll have to put a woman's touch on it. We decided to stay in San Diego. I liked my new job and loved my new roommate. The company is now called Simpson, Adams, and O'Connor Consulting. I finally accepted the partnership. I didn't lose any money with the change because our company had grown. We've had to hire 3 more consultants, all on the commission plan. There was another addition to the firm. We hired an office manager to run the business side. It's good to see Rebecca take on that job and do well. Jake and Gary say that she is a real asset and much prettier to look at than me. Rebecca and I bought a 3-bedroom townhouse on Claremont Mesa Boulevard. It doesn't have a view of the ocean, but there are a lot of good hiking trails around and through the development. We kept renting the trailer for 2 years as a weekend getaway. Recently, we let it go and bought a small cottage on Lake Elsinore. I recently bought Rebecca a new Harley, and we take long rides along the coast and into the mountains. She rides it to work sometimes, when she doesn't ride behind me. So far, I haven't let her do the driving, but maybe someday. Rebecca, after asking my advice, left all her money in her father's care. We have everything we need and most of what we want and haven't needed it. Someday when Jason retires, maybe we'll have to take control of the money, but for now, let him worry about it. We've gotten involved in some charities that help children. Making some kids' life a little better returns much more than we give. The smiles, joy, and happiness of the children touches our hearts and helps overcome our disappointment of not having kids of our own. Rebecca and I are rich where it matters. We have each other. We've finally gotten where we always meant to be, and life goes on. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.